Hello, I'm Joey and I'm here to talk about some neo-retro news.
Fuck! Put down the console, you...
Hello, Universe. I'm Joey and I'm here to bring you some neo-retro news. Previously, I have talked about some cloned video game consoles, and I mentioned the RetroGEN adapter. There are some things about it that I feel like discussing because since I've briefly mentioned it before, I think it's about time I talk about some of the things that I've learned about it to clarify this interesting little device.
Video games are for little kids. Why are adults playing video games?
Also, I've talked about the retro video game system before. Well, apparently that's undergone some evolution.
Now you're 32 and you're sitting there, I'm Batman, I'm Superman, I can fly. Look at my Wolverine shirt. He has claws. You read comic books? That is for people who are special, okay? There's a layer of patheticness here, though, that no one is talking about.
Speaking of evolution, or lack therefore of...
In the old days, you lived in the basement because you were mentally handicapped. When we saw 12-year-olds playing Star Wars with 9-year-olds, we went, poor bastard, oh well.
This social commentator, or whatever the hell he is, made some interesting comments on people who play video games and read comic books. Yeah, I'll deal with that near the end of the video.
It's embarrassing.
Here we have the RetroGEN adapter. It's actually pretty cool. I'm just gonna give a brief description of it at the moment. This RetroGEN adapter, it's actually pretty good at recreating Sega Genesis on the Super Nintendo. Alright, how do you play Sega Genesis games on a Super Nintendo? You put a Sega Genesis on the Super Nintendo. It doesn't actually play it through the Super Nintendo's processing abilities. That would be extraordinarily challenging for any amount of hardware to translate the Genesis into anything a Super Nintendo could handle. But it does set on a Super Nintendo and draw electricity from the Super Nintendo, and inside of it is basically a miniaturized clone Sega Genesis. And it has its own AV cables. And first off, I've mentioned this device before. Previously, I assumed it would work with the power-based converter, and while I had tried Shinobi with some success with the other one I had before it broke, I discovered that when I tried a few other games, Shinobi was the only Sega Master System game I could get to work with this when I hooked the power-based converter onto it. And Shinobi's music was not working. Now, I also figured out why the AV cables on this broke. It wasn't immediately obvious to me previously why the AV cables broke on the other one I had, but I think it was wear and tear due to, I guess you could call it a little bit of a design flaw. I'll show you. Alright, this is the case inside. There's the AV cables that come with it, and this end here plugs into this right over here, where that little opening is, where it says AV out. Now, when this sets into a Retro Duo or a Retro Trio, which was one of the first places I tried this, you have a lot of space, but you have space between here and the console itself. When you set this into a Super Nintendo, the actual Super Nintendo, the plastic of the Super Nintendo, the exterior of it, tends to press against just about right to here. Yeah, you want to make sure that never does any other cable, or even this cable itself, loop in underneath this part here where it plugs into the RetroGEN adapter, because this is pretty tight against the body of the Super Nintendo. So while there is space for this cable to go into that hole, if any part of this cable doubles under itself. If any cable goes under here, it'll put a lot of pressure on this cable and a lot of strain on this. So that's probably why that was just about ready to break when I got it. So I think that's why the first one I purchased, because I purchased the first one I had used, I think that's why it didn't last very long. But it's a pretty cool device. Takes power from the Super Nintendo, electrical power, and controller inputs from the Super Nintendo, and with its own AV cables it outputs Sega Genesis games. The Sega Genesis or Mega Drive games clamp onto the top here. But the only problem with that is it takes the controller inputs from the Super Nintendo, and Super Nintendo controllers, well, they're kind of iconic and nostalgic. They're not as good as a Genesis controller, so it is a bit of a downgrade. But there are some pretty cool aftermarket Super Nintendo controllers that you can get that have a button layout kind of like the Sega Genesis. So that's what I'd recommend with this. I recommend the SN Pro Pad. Alright, now this is an excellent controller, be it with playing Sega Genesis games on the RetroGEN adapter or any Super Nintendo games on the Super Nintendo itself. This controller, it has a bit of a better feel than the Super Nintendo's original controllers, which were pretty good controllers. It doesn't feel quite as good as a Sega Genesis controller, an original Sega Genesis controller, be it 3-button or 6-button. This is a good controller though, with 2 rows of 3 buttons for 6 buttons, plus shoulder buttons. This is a good controller whether you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog or Phantasy Star 4 or Chrono Trigger or the Illusion of Gaia or Crusader Ascenti, Cybernator, Target Earth. And it's a pretty cool novelty to be able to play Sega Genesis games on the Super Nintendo.
What the fuck? Put down the console, you grown man baby!
Well, I'm not standing in front of the camera. Just doing a quick little video. One thing I talked about in the past that I felt like I should do an update on is, remember the retro video game system, the Retro VGS? Yeah, I talked about that before. Yeah, things have happened with it. In a previous video, I talked about the retro video game system, huh? Yeah, Retro VGS, the retro video game system. Yeah, it changed into the Coleco Chameleon. Looks like it's still going to exist. I don't see any Sega Genesis style ports on this thing, like Atari, Sega control ports. So I'm actually losing a little interest in it. Yeah. What happened to that? There used to be USB and E9 control ports for this thing. Now it's just USB control ports? Oh well, it might be interesting. Still has the interesting physical form of a Atari Jaguar. That's kind of a cool shape. A guy named Gavin McInnes said some really stupid things about people that play video games and read comic books, though his focus was on video games. And I really could have did a video talking about it and really analyzed what he was saying, and even compared it to things I've heard from other people over the years. But between the Amazing Atheist, Review Tech USA, the Happy Console Gamer, Alpha Omega Sid, I think a lot of people handled the subject really well. I knew by the time I finished editing a video, it would take me so long to finish editing. It just really wouldn't be worth it. Then
his glasses, long hair, and a Batman shirt, which is pretty cool as a 30-year-old man.
Then
I don't agree with the way that he's making this video, just taking short clips.
You have to be honest with yourself, like, video games are for kids, like...
Then
He saw 12-year-olds playing Star Wars with 9-year-olds who went, poor bastard, oh well, I guess he'll be living with his mommy forever. Now that's cool! Now you want to argue about it.
Ha! Yeah, the reason it's cool and mainstream now is because those kids that you made fun of
Oh, this pisses me off so
were
much.
playing Star Wars when they were 12. Losers! Those kids all grew up to be engineers and programmers and maybe even some are game developers. And all those kids that you were hanging out with, making fun of those kids, like, what losers? They all grew up to, be the manager at fucking tire centers.
Oh, yeah?
Well, I discovered a reaction to it where they defended what he said. And then I was like, well, you know what? I just have to analyze the levels of crazy here. I have to do a video dedicated to this. Would I do it as Neo Retro News? Would I do it as a full-blown overview of those online videos? And I thought to myself, yeah, I'm going to do a video on that. I am going to take a full-blown look into crazy and stupid and obnoxious.
Gavin McInnes founded Vice.
Looking at what Gavin McGinnis said about video games and video game players, and the fact that there's some people out there that actually defended him. That's a subject I really gotta rant about. Before I do my usual thing and put up some title images of various other videos in the UNIMULTIVERSE archive series, I'm just gonna put up some images here and put in some links as well to some related videos to what you've just seen. Alright, so of course we have the original video by Gavin McInnes on the top left-hand side, and to the top right-hand side, the one where highbrow highlights, or whatever they're called, strike back against the Amazing Atheist. And of course, in the middle, yeah, that's the Amazing Atheist video right there. And in the second row, we have a video by the Happy Console Gamer. He did a pretty good reaction video. Review Tech USA had some pretty good comments on it. Alpha Omega Sin did a good video, as he usually does. And one that I actually discovered later. Top Hats and Champagne did a video. That's in the bottom left-hand corner. I discovered that one after I saw all the other videos. And just because it's in the news right now, or it's kind of news, just because I thought it was funny, you might want to take a look at this one, where Alpha Omega Sin tells us about something that's in the news. Some guy goes to Target and urinates on some video games. Kind of sounds like it could be Gavin McInnes. But actually, it turns out it's not. Kind of sounds like something he would do, though.
This is the Amazing Atheist. His glasses, long hair, and a Batman shirt, which is pretty cool as a 30-year-old man.